Hello and welcome to Football Talk by the 2 Point Conversion. My name is Dylan Jackson. Today I'm joined by Jacob LaQuire. Jacob, how you doing today?
I think you know how I'm doing if you look at a certain 1 p.m. EST game score. I'm doing great right now, and we'll be talking about that game here in a few minutes.
Yeah, just buzzing from a Panthers win, really. We've got a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about a lot of the teams that played well, a lot of the teams that didn't. We're going to give our takes, maybe a quick draft update. You can follow the show at 2P underscore conversion on Twitter. You can follow it on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Of course, subscribe to the 2 Point Conversion at 2pointconversion.com as well. So we're going to hit our first segment, Jacob. We did it last week, but it's so over. We're so back. We each came to the table with three different teams that it's either so over or so back for. Jacob, who is the first team that you want to talk about today?
It is so over, unfortunately, for the Tennessee Titans, the team that picked number one overall last year or in this past year's draft. Might be surprised to say that, oh, it's over for a team that was the worst team in the league last year. Yes, because they are 1-5 to start the season. Their only win coming from just an epic meltdown from the Cardinals last week. They lose to the Las Vegas Raiders this past week, or like an hour ago, 20-10, and the Raiders aren't a very good team. Multiple turnovers. Calvin Ridley got hurt early in the game. They might be the leader in the clubhouse for next year's number one overall pick. And I think when I say it's over for the team, I mean more so this iteration of the team, because I think Brian Callahan, the head coach, has no more cards to play. The win that they got last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago, may have bought him some time, but I think that we are getting to the end of at least this era of the Tennessee Titans.
I would say that the Titans look like a worse team this year than they did last year. And for a
Yes.
team that added a potential franchise quarterback in Cam Ward, for a team that invested in the offensive line, for that to be the case, and I think pretty clearly the case, I think that is truly unfortunate and just not the direction that you want to be going. It's unfortunate because I think Brian Callahan did a lot of good things last year, particularly when Will Levis was at quarterback. But I think it's just kind of devolved and devolved as the course of the season has gone along. Their one win this year, really, they should not have won that game against Arizona last week, where it was essentially several different fluky plays stacking up on top of each other. Whether it was like an interception that Arizona had where they immediately fumbled the ball, or Amari DiMercado fumbling on the goal line, that would have been a 73-yard touchdown run. So it is pretty over. I think it's been over for quite some time, but to lose against a Raiders team that's been kind of floundering since week one, it's pretty unfortunate. And I genuinely would not be surprised if there's some head coaching decisions that are made in the next few hours or days for the Titans.
Yeah, I almost said that it would be over for the Raiders as well. Like, luckily they got the win today, and I think you see the absence of Brock Bowers, right, who they lost in week one. The offense has just kind of been hapless since then. I think Ashton Genty played well today. They got him going. But yeah, on the other side of the ball, the Titans, it's just rough. Like, how many more wins are you going to get from them? They're already 1-5, right? Then they have the Patriots next week, who are a good team this year so far. Drake May's been very, very good. The Colts, who are 5-1, who lead the AFC. The Chargers, the Texans, who I think are going to be more well rested to get some people back on offense. Like, there aren't winnable, or not winnable. There aren't like scheduled winnable games on here, other than maybe Cleveland. And Cleveland, if Dylan Gabriel starts to turn things around, who knows, right? This is, I think it's embarrassing to go from, they were 3-14 last year, I believe, to a team that's like maybe going to be worse than that. And to me, that's why this iteration of the organization is going to be over.
Yeah, you mentioned their schedule. If you look, there's really just not many winnable games. You have Cleveland on the road, You've got the Saints at home, second last game of the year. And then maybe if things go your way, Jacksonville in the final game of the year might be a game where the Jags rest their starters potentially if things go their way the rest of the year. But there's just not a lot of games where you could feasibly predict the Colts, or sorry, not the Colts, the Titans to win a game. So it does feel very over. The infrastructure is bad. I feel like the players have kind of, for a while now, given up on this coaching staff, and it's unfortunate because I really do think that Cam Ward has had his moments this year. Obviously, in this game, he threw an interception, was sacked 6 times, fumbled the ball twice. I think they gave the ball up in both of those instances. So, not the best game from him, but there's only so much you can do with lackluster offensive line play when your running game only gets 65 yards and when your top 3 receivers are Van Jefferson, Chigakonkwo, and Alec Ayomin. So I feel bad for Cam Ward in a way. I think it will get better for him as his career progresses, but it's getting to the point where I do feel like this team is consistently letting him down, probably more than he's letting them down.
Reminds me a lot of rookie year Bryce Young, like that Carolina Panthers squad where coaches get fired within the first year of Bryce Young's rookie year.
Yeah,
I believe that offensive line gave up the most quick pressures and unblocked pressures in the PFF era. Like, it was just all bad. One of the worst defenses in the league as well. That's kind of the vibes I'm getting from this Titans team here. And luckily, at least so far, they haven't given away their future number one pick this year. So they can still get an impact player, but I don't
we
know.
were talking about it before the podcast. There are currently 6 teams with 1 or fewer wins, right? So even if this Titans team, let's say they get to 3 wins, do you think they're guaranteed like the first overall pick, or certainly not the first overall pick, but maybe like second or even third?
I don't know. There are a lot of stinkers
It's a
so far
lot of
this
bad
year, right?
teams.
So I'm
Yeah,
going to go down the list. This is according to Tankathon, the projected draft order right now. Obviously, the Jets are first; they're 0-6. Cleveland is 1-5. Baltimore is 1-5. I don't expect Baltimore to stay in the top 5, so that
yeah,
might be a spot they can move up. But Miami looks pretty hapless. The New Orleans Saints, I think they're a bit better than the rest of the 1-5 teams. And then you have Tennessee. So it's not a guarantee you're going to get a top 5 pick. And even if you do, you probably don't want to punt on Cam Ward already, right? So you would
definitely
get
not.
some of
No.
the better non QB players, but it might not be somebody like Ruben Bain or some of the other stars that we'll talk about later in the episode. You might have to settle for the second best at a position because there's just so many bad teams this season.
And speaking of bad teams, for the New York Jets, I think it's so over. And for Aaron Glenn specifically, I think it's even more over for him. I don't know that I've seen a game more woefully mismanaged from a coaching standpoint than what this Jets team did today in London against a Broncos team that they looked capable of beating. Justin Fields looked pretty inept, just not really super capable of making it to his second read. Unfortunately, I think that we were pretty excited about what he could have been after week 1, and he's had some solid performances this year so far. But 45 total passing yards for him, and net, if you include the sacks, he was sacked 9 times for 55 yards. That is negative 10 total passing yards in an NFL game. That is completely inexcusable. Aaron Glenn was asked about the quarterback situation and pretended that the question was unwarranted for next week's game against the Carolina Panthers. So I think it's bad vibes. It doesn't seem to be maybe what we had hoped Aaron Glenn would do with the New York Jets. I thought their framework to be sneaky mid at least was pretty good between the run game potential and the defensive talent. But they're 0-6, the only winless team in the NFL. And I think the defense actually did come to play against the Broncos. They generated solid pressure. They obviously only allowed 13 points. Bo Nix only 174 yards in the running game, 26 carries for 78 yards. That's pretty good defense there. But even with all of that, even with the ball at basically midfield on the last drive of this game. Jacob, did you ever feel like there was a chance for them to win, even with that situation at the end?
Not at all. And this even goes back to when they had the lead, when they got a safety with holding in the end zone there by I think Garrett Bowles, the right
Yeah.
tackle. And even at that point, despite the fact that the Broncos had scored 10 points at that time in the game, I just had no faith that the Jets could hold on to the lead. And you saw it every single time they were on offense. It was just if they got rushing yards, it was like a 3 yard run by Brees Hall, and then it was maybe a 2 yard pass to Garrett Wilson, who left kind of banged up in this game, looked a little bit confused as to what the offense was, and then it was a sack from Justin Fields on third down. We talked on Wednesday when we recorded about how good the Broncos were at sacking the quarterback. They had 21 sacks through 5 games going into this week. They have 30 now because they got 9 in this game, and a lot of those weren't coverage sacks. They weren't just instant pressures. Some of them were, but a lot of it was just Justin Fields not getting rid of the ball. And when you have a quarterback that doesn't make the mistake-free play, you have a passing offense that just won't work. It doesn't matter how good the run game is or how good the defense is. You can't be mid if you're just bad at the quarterback position. I think that's what we've seen at least through weeks 2 through 6, because I thought week 1 Fields actually looked pretty good, but since then it's just been a nosedive.
What do you think the longest drive this Jets team had in this game was? How many yards do you think?
Ooh, let's go like 16 because they netted what, like 80 yards. So let's say 16.
Their longest drive was their third quarter opening where they scored a field goal, 10 plays, 37 yards.
Okay.
Ironically, their second longest drive was their end of half. Uh,
Oh
if
God.
you want to call that a drive, that was, we could talk about
That
that
was the
too.
worst part.
That was the worst part of this game. It's very rare that you get commentators and analysts calling the game that are so willing to criticize coaching decisions that blatantly. And that's kind of what Kurt Warner did. Kurt Warner did that, and then he tweeted it while he was broadcasting, um, which I thought was funny. But they called a timeout prior to a fourth down, which I think they then faked and got it, which good for them, I guess. And then they called a timeout on right before a 3rd and 7, which they got 6 yards, and then on another 4th and 1, they just punted it away, or I guess they didn't punt it; they
They
just let
let
the
the
clock
clock
run
run
out.
out, and they had like 20
Which
seconds before that play,
they
or
had
maybe it's like
20 seconds.
15.
The fact you don't even get off a Hail Mary attempt in that game. And look, I know it's the Jets, and I'm pretty sure this is the team that against the Miami Dolphins several years ago, they attempted a Hail Mary at the end of the half and it was returned for a touchdown. I get there's at least some level of history there, but when your offense is this inept at moving the ball, for you to not even attempt, or for you to actually attempt to drive down the field, but then lack the aggression to take it where it needs to go, just so weird all around. Just it was really really bad. I don't think that Aaron Glenn knew what he wanted to do on that drive, and it was never more apparent that a team has been playing to not lose than that drive.
It didn't even look like they were playing to not lose. They were just
Yeah,
playing to go home back to the States.
yeah,
Garrett Wilson was incensed at the before half, like not yelling, but like being animated, trying to get Aaron Glenn to keep pushing the ball and go for it. And he said
yeah.
after the game that he was just confused as to why they weren't going for it and got a little disappointed. I would be too, because you're just giving up. We talk about how some coaches might like try to take their timeouts into halftime, right, and just kneel it out if they're on their own side of the field or something. Justin Fields has a strong enough arm to get the ball from, let's call it his own 45 to at least close to the other end zone. And they had the
Yeah.
time, they were all lined up. This wasn't like people were running back or anything, and they just didn't do it. It's perplexing.
So weird. Yeah. So I think because of that, it's just over for the New York Jets. I'm pulling up their schedule right now, and they obviously play the Panthers next week. They play the Bengals after that, the Browns after that. Those 3 games are very winnable for this New York Jets team. If they go 0-3 over that stretch, I think there are going to be some uncomfortable conversations happening.
There's uncomfortable conversations now. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah,
at least
yeah,
between us when it comes to the New York Jets. But the other New York team, and this is going to be a positive spin here, the New York Giants, I guess the other New Jersey team, because Buffalo plays tomorrow. But the New York Giants, I think we're back here. We're so back. And it's not the fact that we're automatically a good team. I say we, like I'm talking about the Giants. The Giants aren't automatically a good team now after that win, which they doubled up the Philadelphia Eagles score on Thursday Night Football at home. Is this a good team? I think that's TBD still. The defense can be for real. The defensive front, I think,
yeah.
is real. One of the best in football. Brian Burns is playing his best season so far in his career, all pro, Pro Bowl level player. I'm saying the Giants are back because Jackson Dart and Cam Scadaboo, I think, present a new, like, kind of fun culture where the Giants have been down in the dumps for the last, 3 or 4 years. I think that's the part that the Giants are back. They have a future perspective for the rest of this season and through next season that they can be fun, scrappy teams that can hang with and beat good teams. We just saw them beat the reigning Super Bowl champs. That's why I'm saying the Giants are back. I don't know if they're going to be a good team, but they're 2-4 right now, and they can be scrappy and fun the rest of the season and have players to build off of for next season.
I think Jackson Dart in particular is a really fun quarterback for them to kind of root for this year. Incredible, like running the ball in particular. I'm still pretty hesitant on a lot of the progression stuff, a lot of the mental aspect of the NFL, and I do think that will come with time. But for them to go up against an Eagles defense that's clearly talented, we've kind of talked ad nauseum about that. I think it's very, very impressive for them to do that on a short week and get the win. So for Dart and Scadaboo, like they combined for I think 160 rushing yards on Thursday night. That's crazy. I mean, they had 4 total touchdowns between them running the ball. Just absolutely nuts. Kev Scadaboo, I am still a little bit skeptical. I get that it's worked so far this year. I don't want to come off as like a hater or anything. But I do wonder if that running style will sustain itself throughout not only an entire season, but multiple seasons for sure.
You're just a hater. I don't know what else to say, but no, I agree with you. It's very what's the word? Not concussive because
He's
that's
very fun. Don't
he's
get me
very
wrong.
fun. It's he seeks impact, and that's not necessarily the best trait for longevity. But in his pro, like you see it, he's very fun. They run stylistically different, but the way that they seek out contact reminded me of Dante Foreman a couple
Okay.
years ago for the
Yeah.
Panthers. Like very physical runner. The and on Jackson Dart's side of it, I'm still skeptical about the progressions as well and developing as a passer, but his willingness to tuck and run. There's a play where I think it was like 3rd and 8 or something, and he's running on the right sideline. And I believe Jihad Campbell is there to make the play, like to shove him out of bounds to stop. And Dart kind of like torpedoes his body towards Jihad Campbell and gets the first down.
That's right.
Like he is like leaning. It would be targeting if you were a defender because he was like going head first, but his willingness to do that kind of thing and get the first down. It kind of reminds me of like Oklahoma Baker, like the psycho in him a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's a fun player to root for. And especially when they win, I think the Giants are going to be, at least the Giants fans are going to be back having a good time for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, all the reports around draft time about Jackson Dart and kind of the football character that he has, I remember reading that like every single one of his teammates loved what he was at Ole Miss, in part because he was willing to put like all of it on the line for his team, which has been incredibly apparent over the past few weeks with this Giants team. 2-1 as a starter for Jackson Dart. So we'll see if it can kind of sustain itself. But I think there is absolutely a level of excitement that this Giants team has that I don't think they've had in years, like actual years. It's a tough schedule coming up. Don't get me wrong, Denver, at Philly the week after that, San Francisco. So they have some tough games, but it really is just the Jackson Dart show, and I don't necessarily think it's about how many wins you can get this year, because I still think from a talent perspective, I mean they don't have any receivers, right? Wandale Robinson, Lil Jordan Humphrey, who I legitimately did not know was still in the NFL. Jalen Hyatt is making an appearance, so I still think they're outmatched on both, the weapons department and the offensive line, but it's a very fun team considering the running game, the rookie quarterback, and the front seven. So, um, are they good? I don't necessarily think so, but are they fun and can they be frisky? Yeah, absolutely.
Just compare that to the Titans. Like, these are the 2 teams
Yeah,
that have
yeah.
first round quarterbacks, and it's night and day.
Difference of one win, by the way, and just imagine like the vibes could not be any more different than for those two teams.
For sure. One of those wins was the LA Chargers.
For the LA Chargers. We are so back. Um, I get that it's a win against the Miami Dolphins. I get it. It is a team that I do not think is good. It is a team that I do not think is going to have a coach after the season. With that said, I think it's still an incredibly gutsy win, and it was a must-have game for this Chargers team. Justin Herbert, 29 for 38, 2 touchdowns, almost 270 yards. Kamani Vidal, incredible game for him, 18 carries, 124 yards. Um, this Chargers team really battled back. So, with about less than a minute left to go, Darren Waller caught a touchdown to take a 1 point lead for the Miami Dolphins. Um, Chargers get back on offense, immediately hit a catch and run to Lad McConkey, gets them into field goal range. The Chargers able to battle back, win with practically no offensive line. There's no Amari Hampton. Wide receiver one, Quentin Johnston, by the way, he was out. And I think Justin Herbert just kind of put the team on his back once again, as he tends to do. Justin Herbert, 18 game winning drives since 2019. Only Patrick Mahomes wins more. I think the defense also did what it needed to in this game. They got 3 interceptions. The St. Juste interception in the third quarter really changed the complexion of what this game could have been. They got that with, I want to say it was like midway through the third quarter, and then the Chargers were able to score a quick 4 play, 37-yard touchdown to take a 10 point lead. Obviously, the Dolphins battle back, but yeah, the Chargers. I think it's so back for them. 4-2 now with some pretty signature wins. I get that it hasn't been the most pretty thing in the world over the past 2 games against the Giants and the Commanders, and it's going to get tough too. They play a team in the Indianapolis Colts that has the best record in the NFL, shockingly, next week. So that'll be fun. They'll play Brian Flores after that, and then some other tough games throughout the remainder of their schedule, like Philly, Kansas City, Denver. So I think that it's a much needed win. And I also think that the Chargers are well on their way to a playoff berth.
This game in particular, I think the outcome had the most skewed, or it would have skewed my opinion the most out of all the games this week, right?
For
If
sure.
they lose this game, it's a 3 game losing streak to the Giants, the Commanders, and that was Jaden Daniels' first game back, and then the Miami Dolphins, right? But they get the win. I guess technically it's a come from behind win because, like you said, the Dolphins score there at the end. But to do it without Amari Hampton, without Quentin Johnston, a lot of O line injuries, that was a tough win, one that they needed for sure. And after a couple, we'll say lulls over the past couple of weeks, Justin Herbert played well again. Like, he was on
Yeah.
an MVP pace. I thought that took a quite a hit in weeks 4 and 5, but I think he's back to that spot. It's going to be tough because they still aren't going to have Amari Hampton for at least a handful of games. He's on IR, and this morning they said it could be more. Mike Garafolo said it might be more than four
Yeah.
weeks. So they're going to have to thug it out with like Hassan Haskins, Vidal, who had a very good game, or if they like end up trading for somebody. But I think this is a need or a win that they needed, and for a team that coming into the day because Denver won had lost their lead on the AFC West. They got it back, or they're at least tied for the lead now, and they're going to have to continue to stack wins because the other teams in the division, I think, other than the Raiders, of course, I think are getting like hitting their stride and have been hitting their stride.
Much needed win for the Chargers. Yeah, like for them to kind of stay pace with the division, obviously they're going to have to keep a leg up on Kansas City, who just kicked off against the Detroit Lions on Sunday Night Football, actually. But the Denver Broncos, surprisingly, are now, I think they lead the division, if I'm not mistaken. I think they actually, the Chargers have the tiebreaker against Denver, so it is those two teams on top currently at 4-2 apiece, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, this division as a whole looks really good, minus one team at the bottom, who I think we'll talk about a little bit later. But who is your next team, Jacob?
Yeah, you talked about game-winning drives, right? Nobody's done it more than Justin Herbert since 2019. I bet if you went back to 2023, there'd be another QB up there near the top of the list, and that's Bryce Young. And that's because all of his wins are basically game-winning drives. And I think the Panthers, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but as a Panthers fan, I think we're back. And let me say why. Obviously, we win a very contested game today against what was the best offense in the league coming into the day. I believe they were close to points or the most points scored. They had the most yards by a pretty significant margin. And we win the game 30-27. Bryce Young got his weekly mandated interception, although this one wasn't his fault. Word to Theo Ash, not his fault. And they still rally back from an early interception. Tedero McMillan has his first two NFL touchdowns. Rico Dowdle, another just monster game, revenge game against the Cowboys, who didn't want to extend him. He had 200 scrimmage yards, over 200 scrimmage yards, I should say, back-to-back games with 200 or more scrimmage yards. He also scored a receiving touchdown in this game. He put forth the highest scrimmage yards total, that's rushing and receiving, in franchise history in a single game. And that's people like Christian McCaffrey didn't get to his number today, which was 239. D'Angelo Williams didn't get to that number ever. Jonathan Stewart never got to that. Guys like Steve Smith didn't get to that. So yardage-wise, single best performance by a non-Panther QB. This team is at 500 for the first time since week 10 of 2021. You know how long that is? That's like so long. You could go to high school for all 4 years and never see a 500 season from the Panthers if this was the particular stretch you're in. You go to college, you could like start your life and never see it, but the Panthers are back to that point. You mentioned we have a game against the Jets next week. Hopefully, the Panthers take care of business. But I want to say that the Panthers are back, not because we're going to be a playoff team. Hopefully, we will. But because we have a statement win for the first time and feels like such a long time. You asked how important this win was, or this is the most important win since earlier in the 2-point conversion chat. And I said that this was the most important one since Christmas Eve 2022, where we beat the Detroit Lions. That was the game where Deontay Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, and the franchise rush for 320 yards. I think that has been surpassed, and this has been the most meaningful win, other than maybe Bryce Young's first win since then.
Yeah, I went back even further. The game that I actually thought of, I don't know if you remember this, the Kyle Allen Houston Texans game when
Yes,
Ron Rivera was still coach. That's what I thought of
when
as kind
they
of the
when JJ Watt almost sacked him and he like folded in half and popped back up and had the game-winning
yeah,
score.
yeah,
Yeah.
great play by Kyle Allen. That season obviously didn't go as maybe what we thought it would. But yeah, this Panthers team looked incredible today. I think that their defense performed significantly better than the 27 points allowed. Kind of makes it look right. Like they only allowed 292 yards, only 29 yards to Javonte Williams. My question to you, has there ever been a better revenge game from a position player? Like not a quarterback, I'll say.
I can I can think
It's
of
hard it's hard to
one
do that like off
against
the
the
top of the head.
Panthers. I can think of one in particular against the Panthers by Steve Smith Sr.
Yeah,
when he said, "Tell him to mow my lawn," and he had like 100 something yards on 4 catches and 2 touchdowns. That one was pretty. That one hurt, and it was
yeah.
personal. But this one, I think, hurt the Cowboys maybe just as much, and just an incredible game for Dowdle, who I think even once Chuba Hubbard progresses and comes back, it's going to be very hard to keep Dowdle off the field for the majority of the carries.
Yeah, yeah, he looked incredible in this game and has both games that he started for the Panthers so far this season. Chuba Hubbard can take all the time he needs to recover at the current moment. We'll see how it goes next week. But yeah, Rico Dowdle looked great. This was also, I think, one of the best games of Bryce Young's career as well, which is weird to see because he was 17 for 25, 199 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. That was not his fault. It was tipped off of Teteroa McMillan's hands. Should have been an easy slant catch. It was not, apparently, and the Cowboys took advantage. But Bryce Young, I think, was very, very effective in his downfield throwing, which I've been pretty critical of so far this year. He was one of the worst, if not the worst, player throwing beyond 20 yards so far this season. And for them to get, I think, multiple touchdowns, one to Teteroa McMillan, and then another to Rico Dowdle, that was massive for this Panthers team. And I think building confidence for Bryce Young and his downfield throwing. He also looked better, kind of managing the pocket. There was only one sack that he took this year or this game. Dave Canales, I think, had his best game play calling that I can remember, probably the best since he's been Panthers head coach. I don't think that's too crazy to say, and probably the best 2 game stretch of play calling he's had since being Panthers coach as well. So um, all impressive game from this Panthers offense in particular, but I think their defense played much better than what that 27 score said too.
Yeah, the interception there kind of set Dallas up for it's like a 20-yard go ahead score, right? Or they only had 20 yards to go before they could get another touchdown there. So
Yeah,
a short field there. But overall, I think the team performed very well. The defense as well, like you said, going from the worst run defense ever to a team that's pretty competent against the run outside of the first game of the season. That's a huge upgrade for this team. It just shows that they can play complementary football. And like I said, going to MetLife Stadium to East Rutherford, New Jersey next week to play the Jets. This was a signature win this week for Dave Canales, but you have to follow it up by beating the team that you're probably supposed to beat next week.
yeah, and like this team plays a lot of good teams in the second half of their season. After the Jets, it's the Bills, it's the Packers. You've got Tampa Bay twice at the end of the year. You've got the Rams, you've got the 49ers who just lost Fred Warner for the season, unfortunately. But there's a lot of good teams on the schedule for the Panthers left. So for them to get a big win against Dallas, for them to potentially beat the Jets and have a winning record, they're going to need to win that game if they want any sort of playoff aspirations, which feels very crazy to say considering the state of what the Panthers have been for so long now.
Yeah, play man, playoff. It's been so long. 2017 was the last playoff game. I think we all yearn to be back in the playoffs, but before you can think about that, you got to take care of business. And we talked about how bad the Jets were. I see that as a must-win game for the Panthers
Yeah.
next week.
The path for Carolina, and I think that it's important to point out here that the NFC has been much better than the AFC this year so far.
For
when
sure.
we talked about, or we didn't, I don't think we've talked about it in a while, but the 2 point conversion top 10 this week, it's going to change week to week, obviously, but this week 7 of the top 10 teams were in the NFC conference, and then the AFC conference, Indianapolis and the Jaguars were 2 of the 3 teams, including the Bills, that were in the top 10. So there's a lot more confidence in these NFC teams for them to kind of continue their success into the playoffs and make wild card bids. If you want to map out where the Panthers could potentially steal a few wins and maybe get a winning record if things go according to plan, we'll say, obviously they have to take advantage of this Jets team. That would get them to 4 wins. They would have to sweep the Saints. That would get them to 6. You probably have to beat Atlanta as well. Again, they beat them 30-0 in week 3. I think that was a little bit more Atlanta self-destructing than Carolina being objectively good. But that would get you to 7 wins. After that, you need to find 2 wins between Buffalo, Green Bay, Tampa twice, Seattle, San Francisco, and the Rams, which is not impossible, especially if Tampa Bay is already locked up the division by that Week 18 game. That could potentially be their 8th win, and then they'd have to find another win elsewhere.
I am hopeful that we can attempt to do that at some point in the season. And there's another team they were hopeful following a trade, 6 days ago, something like that. Another big cat team. But as you have listed it here, I think it's over for the Cincinnati Bengals.
It is very over for the Bengals, and it was kind of always over so long as Joe Burrow was going to be hurt. I just, even with a Joe Flacco trade, he was never going to save this team. Like, he was benched for Dylan Gabriel. And Dylan Gabriel, I he's not exactly the most exciting rookie quarter. He was a 3rd round rookie, not like a 1st round guy. It's not like a Deshaun Kaiser situation where he was a high 2nd round pick. He is a late 3rd round pick, borderline day 3 pick. So for Joe Flacco to be benched and then traded from a team that has that guy starting, I don't necessarily think that bodes a ton of confidence. Um, they fought back against the Packers, but they didn't have the juice. Joe Flacco didn't know the offense. It's been like 5 days since he was traded to the Bengals. And if you just want to look at the talent on this team, Trey Hendrickson also got hurt as well in this game. I don't know if that's like a fake hurt type of thing for a trade or whatever it may be. He I think left the game midway through, I think 3rd quarter, if I'm not mistaken. The talent on this team as a whole, excluding the playmakers, is terrible up front on the offensive line. The running game hasn't been there. As much as I love Chase Brown, I just don't think he's been taking advantages as much as he could of the I guess open lanes that, there's been very few, but he hasn't really taken advantage of them in any way. The defensive line outside of Hendrickson, I think that's maybe the strength of this defense. You've got TJ Slayton, who's impressed in the snaps that he's gotten. Shamar Stewart, I think, plays a role for this team. But outside of that, it's just completely barren of talent all across this team. And I don't even think Joe Burrow could save this team from being at least mediocre. Certainly, if you were playing, things would be a lot more optimistic, but he was kind of covering up a lot of the talent deficiencies of this Bengals team. So as soon as he left, it was so over. But at 2-4, in a division that has the Steelers, has the Ravens, as bad as they are so far this season, I think it's very, very over for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, the Bengals are 0-4 in the games that Joe Burrow has not started. They're 2-4 on the season, which, if you understand that, that means Joe Burrow started in both of their wins. Until he comes back, if he comes back, it's going to be very tough. They have the Browns again. Maybe they can catch the Ravens while they're still injured, but they're certainly not winning the division especially now that the Steelers have won. They beat the Browns this week. They're not going to win the division, and there might be a chance for a wild card spot, but it's very hard to see. This has no bearing on the Bengals. I just saw a stat that says Rico Dowdle is 3rd in rushing yards through 6 games, and he started in 2 games. I just wanted to bring that back up because he's been incredible the past 2 weeks. But you mentioned Chase Brown, on the other hand, just very disappointing, I think, to start the year.
Yeah.
And obviously it hurts to not have Burrow stressing the defense down the field, right? With Jamar Chase, with T. Higgins. But even in the lanes, like when the running lanes do open, he just doesn't see it. I think he scored his first time today on a 2 point conversion attempt. Shout out 2 point conversion, but overall, the run game's just not there. And if Flacco can't save them, it just might be over for him this year. And they're one of those teams that we talk about that's at the top of the draft. We talked about all the 1-5 and 0-6 teams. The Bengals currently are slated as the seventh overall pick. If the season were to end today, they'd have the seventh overall pick. And I feel like that's a good consolation prize for a year that's already probably over due to injury, but it's just it's just tough 6 weeks in. This was like Zach Taylor's last chance, I would say.
They feel like the Avion Sorrell team to me, where you honestly
Mhm.
just get the most talented defender available.
Maybe. Yeah, it could be him, could be Ruben Bain, could be somebody you are going to talk about later. But as we approach the draft here, I think it's time to have the quarterback discussion, or at least attempt to start it with some of the QBs that could go in round one. I think two have separated themselves so far halfway through the college football regular season. I'm gonna lay them out for you. Number one, these are in no order. The first one, Ty Simpson, Alabama, and the second one, Fernando Mendoza from Indiana, both who had very, very good wins, ranked wins this week, traveling to ranked opponents. Let's start with Ty Simpson. For me, what has impressed, or I guess what he has impressed me with, is his poise, a lot of good third, fourth down plays, his ability to manipulate defenses, and ability to mitigate negative plays. He has two turnovers now. He had a strip sack fumble in this game, and he had one interception against Vanderbilt. What's impressed you about Ty Simpson, and do you think he could possibly be QB1 in this class?
Yeah, he's been throwing it all across the yard. There's really not a single area of the field that he can't access with his arm, which I think is probably the most impressive part to me. I have some questions about just like I want to see it more. Like we've only seen what 6 games of Ty Simpson so far of his like
Right.
collegiate career because he played behind obviously Jalen Milrow. I think he was Bryce Young's backup at one point. So like we haven't just seen it a ton, which I mean when you play at Alabama, that's just going to be the case with some instances. But yeah, he's been very very solid. 3 touchdowns, 200 yards against Missouri. He his accuracy downfield has been very, very impressive. I think he throws with anticipation as well. Very smart with the ball. I don't think he puts it in harm's way a ton. Obviously, that late turnover against Mizzou is unfortunate, but for the most part, I think he's played a very clean game. Even in the game against FSU in that first week, I think that was a big result of that loss was a big result of that offensive line having one of the worst games I've seen in Alabama offensive line play in quite some time. Caden Proctor was getting bull rushed into Ty Simpson quite a bit, but yeah, I want to see the pocket management improve a little bit. I think he bails on things a little bit too early, and then let's just see it more. I want to see more and more of Ty Simpson because he's been very, very consistent, very impressive. Obviously, he's got an SEC schedule, so the games are just going to keep getting tougher for him. But yeah, let's just see it get consistent, and I can potentially get on board with him being a top 5 pick.
Yeah, I think he's currently tied for first in the Heisman odds with Carson Beck. He might have Beck might have gone ahead today. Leads the SEC in passing touchdowns. He's also rushed for a couple. And like you mentioned, Alabama and your South Carolina Gamecocks as well. They're in the middle of the death gauntlets from hell over the next couple weeks. Simpson just played at Georgia, hosted Vanderbilt, then at Missouri. Then they host Tennessee this week. So that's 4 top 15 teams in a row. So he's certainly playing against high level competition. And I think just we need to see more. I think that's a good point you bring up. Fernando Mendoza, I think the other serious QB1 candidate to this point. For me, he's very, very pinpoint. Like he's able to access all areas of the field. You mentioned it on Saturday when they were playing Oregon. He throws with some RPMs, like he slings
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And it's not as much of a gunslinger as he finds it and immediately hits the hole or hits where he wants to throw. I think he got his signature win this week at in Eugene against Oregon. I think Oregon was number 3 at the time. He pretty significantly outperformed Dante Moore, and I think he's going to have Indiana in a good chance to possibly win the Big Ten because they won't play Ohio State this year. They will play Penn State, but Penn State's kind of in a nosedive. They fired James Franklin today. What's impressed you about Mendoza, and what do you think he has to do to fight off anybody else's QB1? Because I think he's probably the betting favorite, and he certainly has more experience than a guy like Ty Simpson does.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we texted during the Oregon Indiana game. Um, I thought that he very clearly outplayed Dante Moore, especially in the early part of that game. I know he ended up throwing a pick six at one point. That was,
That was
I think,
rough.
it was a very poor decision. I'll put it that way. But yeah, you mentioned the arm talent with Fernando Mendoza. He has a cannon of an arm. And I don't say that in the sense that he's throwing like seeds 40, 50 yards downfield. I think he has the capability to do that. But it's more like on these out routes, he's getting the ball to his receivers quickly, on time, in rhythm. He feels very much like a coach's dream at quarterback, somebody that isn't going to make a ton of mistakes, somebody that's going to play within the offense. um, I'm a little bit concerned about the overall athleticism because I think it lacks quite a bit. But with that said, I don't necessarily think that's going to be how he wins at the NFL level. You see these CJ Stroud, Jared Goff types kind of win within the pocket, kind of dissecting defenses, getting the ball where it needs to be, moving from read to read. That's exactly what Mendoza does very well. Not the most creative quarterback in the world, but again, like if he's got this type of arm talent, he's proven it at Cal before. I think that he's somebody that's, at least to me right now, the clear quarterback one, just from the traits, the accuracy, and just the overall NFL tools. I'm a big fan of what I saw, especially against Oregon.
The pedigree as well, like 3 years a starter, well, most
Yeah.
of 3 years, already has more touchdowns this season than he did in 11 games at Cal last year. Cal also didn't have Elijah Surratt, who is his number one receiver this year, who, by the way, is going to be a top 50 pick in this class. You mentioned Goff. I think that, excuse me, is a great comp in a positive way. Like we're not gonna hate on Goff here just because of like system manager stuff. Goff was number one pick as well. He also went to Cal, like Mendoza did last year. And I think we're going to see a lot more of Mendoza. They won't have any more ranked matchups, at least until the Big Ten championship, I would think, if they make it. But this is a team to me, not just Mendoza, but Indiana as a whole, that I think has Final Four potential in this year's college football playoff. Those two, Simpson and Mendoza, are the clear QB1 candidates to me. There's some other QBs that I think still probably will go in the first round, just maybe not top 3 or something. And Dante Moore, the guy who played against Mendoza this week for Oregon, I think we've both been big fans of him so far. He might have stumbled a bit in this game, looked a bit raw. What are some of your hesitations about Moore? Because we both know he's creative and he can hit every area of the field. What might teams hang, or what might be a hang up for teams about Dante Moore?
Yeah, the progressions, right? I feel like a lot of times that I'm watching more, he's just kind of hanging out in the pocket. At Oregon's offensive line is like better than most Big Ten teams. That's how I'll put it. I don't want to call them an elite unit or anything, but I think that that program has talent up front. Um, it's You can do that in college football, but I think Indiana was really the first team to truly take advantage of kind of the front seven a little bit, where they were able to get after Moore a lot. They got to him quite a bit. I think that he's going to have to prove that he can really get to his next read. He's going to have to prove that he's not just kind of sitting in the pocket aimlessly, looking at I really, that was the biggest struggle with me, is while Fernando Mendoza looked on time, in rhythm, a lot of what Dante Moore was doing, it just seemed a little bit less curated, is how I'll put it, and that's a pretty big concern if you're going to take a quarterback in the top 10, first round, whatever it is. I think that's fine in college football. You can get away with that, especially on a team as talented as Oregon. But we're just going to need more and more reps of him kind of just speeding up his internal clock. It reminded me a little bit of um, the passer that Justin Fields was at Ohio State, where he was just kind of comfortable sitting in the pocket. There was never really too much pressure on him, but in the instances that Moore has faced pressure, he's done well in some cases. Like against Penn State, he was able to step up in the pocket, kind of deliver strikes on target in time. Against Indiana, though, I think it's been very, very clearly his weakest game so far this season.
The Justin Fields, comparison there, I think is a good pull in relation to, like, sitting back in the pocket maybe a bit too long, and, I think you see from past Oregon quarterbacks that have been in the Will Stein system, their offensive coordinator, Dylan Gabriel and Bo Nix especially. Bo Nix was the master of that system, getting stuff out quick, and I think even Gabriel was a bit quicker in terms of running it. Dante Moore is also still a true junior, if you want to call him that. He started as a true freshman at UCLA, backed up Dylan Gabriel last year, and now is starting. It might serve him to stay another year in college. I don't know if he necessarily will, just because the opportunities in the NFL are huge, right? So you need to take advantage of them. But I see the hesitation for sure. It's just his creativity when he's able to get outside is very tantalizing, and it's hard to pass somebody like that up.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I will say is he's usually had answers so far this year when he doesn't go to his first read. Like I think outside of this Indiana game, he's been like decent at it, and he's always had the fallback of just being able to use his legs. I'll also say I think the arm talent was a little bit disappointing against Indiana. While you saw Mendoza just absolutely like ripping it on those outbreaking routes, I think Moore didn't have as much velocity on his throws. Even on the deep ball, it was like a few yards where you would really want it to be on that long touchdown. Still, I'm very, very high on Dante Moore. Obviously, he was my quarterback one going into this game. I think that he's going to end up being like a first round, maybe even top 10 pick. But yeah, I just think it's going to be a thing where he has to develop longer, kind of prove that he actually is worth it, that he's capable of going through those reads and hopefully speeding up that internal clock.
Sounds a lot like, or some of the stuff sounds a lot like the next guy we'll talk about, who we're both fans of. You're obviously a massive fan of. You wrote "Not His Fault" for real about this guy, but Lenora Sellers. Again, every time you watch the games, the athletic traits are amazing. Who they played LSU this week, and he was just able to rip stuff. I thought South Carolina had a chance in that game about midway through, but LSU ultimately just kind of woke up there at the end. What does Sellers have to do to continue being a first round prospect? Because we know that the traits are there, but it sounds like a lot of the stuff you mentioned about Dante Moore can also apply to Sellers, and he doesn't have the talent around him to help him with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is a really bad South Carolina team. Like genuinely one of the worst SEC, non-Vanderbilt SEC offensive lines I've seen in a very long time. Just truly a disaster on all fronts in that area. And I don't say that to absolve Lenore Sellers of blame for how this season has gone so far. He's been hurt, banged up a little bit. And it is similar to the Dante Moore thing where he needs to speed up his internal clock a little bit. I think he's got more arm talent than Dante Moore for sure. And I think that he's elite at several different things. Obviously, breaking tackles in the backfield. I'm not sure that there's a better player in college football. I don't think I know for a fact there's not a better player in college football in terms of backfield creation, keeping plays alive. Lenore Sellers is just one of one in that category. I think not only this year, but over the past decade, potentially, since maybe like Cam Newton in that arena specifically. I think he has the strongest arm in this draft class as well, often to a fault. I think he needs to maybe use a little bit more touch with his receivers who struggle to catch the ball sometimes because he's just throwing fastballs for every single route, whether it's a slant, a screen, a downfield pass, whatever it is, he's throwing that ball like as fast as he possibly can. Um, which he has some RPMs, he can sling it. It's just a lot of the refinement, I think, which it sucks because I think that the South Carolina team, it's hard to focus on that in particular when you have so much pressure in your face constantly with this offensive line. It really felt like every time he dropped back, he was either immediately pressured, or if he did get the pass off, it would be to a receiver who either dropped it or just didn't get as many yards as they needed to. It was really just him on offense and then everybody else. He was tallied for 22 carries against LSU in that game for 19 yards, which just goes to show how many sacks he took courtesy of the O line. I don't think it's a case where this was a quarterback stat in this game. Like he um, was thoroughly pressured immediately and often by this LSU team. And yeah, I think it's just a case of him having to develop more. I think his accuracy has been actually really good this year. The completion percentage probably won't tell you that based off the types of throws that he's making. But I do think that he is still like a solid first round quarterback to me, at least. He just has traits that you cannot teach. And, Lenore Sellers, it might be a case where, maybe it's the Rams, they take him middle of the first round and they're able to actually sit him behind Stafford for a year or two. And that would probably be the best case scenario for him to learn behind Stafford or some other quarterback that's not a complete disaster in terms of NFL infrastructure.
Funny enough, that's who Tankathon's current mock draft has sellers going to is the LA Rams. Could be like a mercenary scenario next year as well if he returns. I could see him getting a lot of money in the portal if he portals. I think a lot of people are going to look at his raw stats and see that he only has 4 touchdowns or 5 with a rushing touchdown and a handful of interceptions. But I think you did a good job explaining like this South Carolina team is not the team they were last season that was knocking on the door of the college football playoff. A lot of attrition
No.
and a lot of
Yeah.
like people to the NFL and stuff like that. But so it certainly isn't Seller's fault. I'll admit that.
Yeah, not his fault. I still believe that he's going to be an NFL quarterback. It's just kind of a matter of time. Um, I really do think that he just has things that you can't teach, and he's even in this game. I think he had some moments where you could see the improvement down to down. It's just very hard to look at what he did this game, considering all of the stuff in between, whether it was the pressure that he faced, the overall just lack of a run game. This Gamecocks team had a 72-yard touchdown run, and then outside of that, they averaged like 2 yards per carry, essentially. It just was not a sight to behold. So, Lenore Sellers, I feel bad in a way because it's just such a bad infrastructure that I feel like it's limiting what he actually is capable of this season.
For sure. He's kind of like the anti Carson Beck, who's the Miami quarterback right now. I think that's the last possible first round QB at this point. Carson Beck, like I think he's operated well in Miami. I think his O line and receivers going or coming from Georgia are an improvement at Miami. He stretched the ball downfield the last couple of games, which is one of the things that people were worried about coming from Georgia this season. He just hasn't really impressed me a ton. Like, I feel like Miami is winning, not necessarily in spite of him, but not necessarily because of him either. I feel like Bet could be a guy that if he just stays solid the whole season, could sneak into the back half of the first round. Do you think he could end up there, or are we looking at like a day two guy for Carson Beck?
This feels like a Will Howard type of situation where really, really good college quarterback, very capable of helping his team win playoff games, maybe a national championship game. This Miami team is very, very good. In terms of NFL talent, I still I think he's a C plus in a lot of different areas for NFL quarterbacks. I think his arm talent is okay. I think his mobility is like fine. I think a lot of the in structure progressions, like his capability to kind of run an NFL offense, I think that I'm very questionable about because a lot of the time it just feels like he's kind of piecing things together based off of the talent around him rather than making these in rhythm throws with this arm talent that's really spectacular. I think it's a lot of like C pluses and then a few like not as good traits for him, which it's great for college, great for Miami this year. I'm just pretty skeptical of him being a true first round quarterback. We'll see how it continues. Obviously, the ACC doesn't have the best competition in the world, and Clemson and FSU being pretty bad goes to show that it's going to be the case again this year. But if he proves it in the playoff games that he's presumably going to be up in, then we could maybe take it a little bit more seriously. But for now, it's still like probably a day three guy to me.
You mentioned Will Howard, Stetson Bennett, another one just like
I
that. I
did
think
think of
Beck's
him too.
arm is
Yeah.
a little bit better, but
Beck has more size. Stetson Bennett
yeah,
was really short and small. I think Beck has more size and has a better NFL or better arm by NFL standards. But yeah, I'm still very, very weary of it.
that's kind of where I'm at as well. The rest of the pack, if you could call it that, or the leaders of the rest of the pack, John Mateer, maybe we can say was rushed back for Red River, but did not shine in this game. He didn't have the it factor. In fact, he threw for 3 interceptions, and some of them looked like wobblers. And I want to say that the thumb, he injured his thumb on his throwing hand. He had surgery. That was partially involved, but he also didn't elevate the team like he had in games against Michigan, who I think Michigan's a better team than Texas, or against Auburn. Auburn's not a better team than Texas. But the point stands that he did not have his best game whatsoever in the Red River rivalry.
Yeah, John Mateer, it wasn't maybe what we hoped for him. I know you were definitely higher on Mateer than myself. This game didn't really change all that much for me, just because I think that he, having to nurse an injury on your throwing hand, I think it's admirable that he tried to come back for this game, but it probably should have waited another week or two.
I agree. Maybe the team just needed him, and yeah, it's admirable. But if your NFL future's on the line, you're probably better off waiting because Oklahoma's still going to be ranked at the end of the day. The last two guys I want to talk about might not be like obvious QB1 or first round QB candidates, but Jaden Mayava from USC Southern Cal and Trinidad Chambliss from Ole Miss, I think have both played very well, maybe under the radar this year. Chambliss obviously plays for, I think Ole Miss is ranked fifth now as of today's AP poll, and he's undefeated. Ole Miss is undefeated, and Jaden Mayava, I think, has benefited from having some of the best receivers in college football, but is also giving them really good passes. Do
Makai
you think
Lemon,
Makai Lemon, receiver, what would you say, wide receiver two in this class,
he
probably?
might be one, to be honest with you.
Might be one. Yeah,
Pound
Arizona
for pound, the
State's kind
best
of
receiver.
fallen off. Pound for pound is a good way to put it for sure because Jordan Tyson's got some pounds on him there. But I think Mayava's been impressive for USC. I think Chambliss has coming from Ferris State FCS or excuse me Division two Ferris State where he was a national champion and kind of taking the starting job from Austin Simmons who got injured in week one but is healthy now and is still the starter because, or Chambliss is still the starter because they're winning. I think that shows a lot. And Lane Kiffin having a lot of trust in him. And then on the same boat with Maeva, Lincoln Riley having a lot of trust in him as well. I think those are two names to just keep your eye on for early drafted quarterbacks.
I also feel bad for Drew Aller.
Yeah.
Obviously had a season-ending injury. This is a season that very clearly has not gone Penn State's way. Coach was fired today, actually. I think $50 million buyout. That's crazy. But Drew Aller, I think it is a pretty. It couldn't have gone worse the past several months. Really, ever since he said he was coming back to Penn State rather than declaring for the NFL draft.
Yeah, maybe some bad advice. I feel like Aller would have been a top 10 pick in this past draft,
Yeah,
and I
he would have been like maybe the first quarterback taken.
and I say that as not a I'm not a super fan of who Aller was last year, but if you compare him as a prospect to Cam Ward, there are a lot of points that you would take Aller for, I guess is how I would put it. And just to suffer a season-ending injury, I think I read that he cannot medical redshirt, or he'd have to petition for one because he played in four or more games in all 4 seasons that he's been the guy there. So it's just unfortunate for Aller, for Penn State fans as a whole. Maybe the Penn State fans are happy that James Franklin was fired. And I'm going to kind of eschew that into my first take of the day. James Franklin, the Penn State head coach, was fired today. He had a $50 million buyout. It is the second biggest buyout of all time, next to only Jimbo Fisher, who it was close to like 100 when Texas A&M fired him. But they have the oil money; they couldn't really care. My first take of the day is that James Franklin's replacement will come from within the Big Ten Conference, where he was just coaching. And I think it is going to be Indiana's head coach, Kurt
Ooh,
Cignetti, who has done probably the best coaching jobs. I'm trying to be like relative here. I think he's done the best coaching job since Nick Saban turned Alabama around. And I don't say that lightly. Like you have guys like Dabo Sweeney who took Clemson that was irrelevant for 20 years to being the ACC winner for a decade. You have Kirby Smart who kind of inherited a good program. You have all these coaches. Ryan Day also inherited a good program. But Nick Saban, turned the Alabama program around. They were really bad when he got there and turned them into that eventual dynasty. Kurt Cignetti, who was on Saban's staff in the early 2010s, I think is doing something similar at Indiana. Who, if you know anything about Indiana football, it's been absent for the greater part of like 50 years. Obviously, they had Michael Penix at one point for 2 seasons where he was hurt both seasons. But I think taking Indiana, whose resources are all time, or not all time, but like in the gutter compared to other schools, they don't get the recruiting, they don't have the NIL, and to take them not only to the playoffs last year, but to be, I think, a real good, like top 3 to 4 legit team this year. I think he's done the best coaching job. And if Penn State are smart, that's who should be the number one guy to replace James Franklin.
yeah, it's really Ohio State, Miami, Indiana, and like everybody else. I think,
Yeah.
or at least that's how I've viewed it so far, through like 6, 7 games so far in college. Um, yeah, Kurt Cignetti, I think, has done the best college football head coaching job I've seen in a very long time. And obviously, I don't follow it as closely as you do, Jacob, but truly a phenomenal job he's done with Indiana. Obviously, they were in the playoff last year. They're going to be there again based off their schedule. They will take care of business. I do believe that. Um, I wonder. I saw that Matt Rule's name was floated as a possibility as well. That I don't know if it's a super good idea for Penn
I think
State.
that's a smokescreen for Cignetti, to be frank, because Matt Rule is an all-time. I don't want to call the person himself a loser, but as a head coach, he does not win ranked matchups, and that was James Franklin's whole issue.
My first thought when you said Big Ten was Matt Campbell.
Interesting.
And I genuinely I don't know how Iowa State has done this year so far, but I just know that his name has been rumored in head coaching jobs
Well, that's
for
Big
like
12,
half a
but
decade. Yeah,
But yeah,
that's true. Yeah, that's true. Um, I don't know how I got that wrong, but yeah, Matt Rule, interesting name. Matt Campbell, interesting name.
Rule is a Penn State
Um,
alum, I guess, as well, is a
okay.
factor there.
I know that there was interest from college teams in Arthur Smith as a head coach too. I don't know if that's as good of an idea for Penn State in particular. Maybe they get the like Bill O'Brien reunion or something like that, but that would be quite the turnaround. My first take also college football related. I think at this point, if the draft happened today, Ohio State linebacker Arvell Reese would be the first non-quarterback taken. And I say that like you already saw the comparisons to Micah Parsons being drawn this past Saturday for Reese. And he's consistently looked like the best player on that Ohio State defense. Um, those comparisons are only going to get louder. And I think as he plays more and more snaps at edge rusher, the pressure numbers, the sack numbers, they're going to continue to climb. He looks explosive, powerful. I think he's the level of athlete that you would need to be an elite NFL edge rusher. And he just has like that it factor that you look for talented guys off the edge. So he to me is like the guy in this draft class so far. If you're looking at non-quarterback specifically,
It's going to be an A plus for me. The Parsons, the Abdul Carter comps, those kind of comps are just going to keep getting louder. I don't, frankly, I don't know why he wasn't playing more edge rusher to start the year. Maybe it was just
yeah.
an experiment kind of thing and they figured it out. Matt Patricia is the defensive coordinator there. And maybe he just found some wrinkles along the way with Reese's ability to rush the passer. And I think we're going to see more and more reps at edge and eventually become a full time edge rusher, kind of like how Carter was toward well, he started at full time edge his final season at Penn State. But yeah, this is going to be an A plus for me, unless somebody covets an offensive lineman before, or I guess as the first non QB. I think Reese far and away has been the best defender, and this is coming from somebody who's been a big fan of Ruben Bain. But I think Reese has gone above and beyond. The only thing I'll say is Ohio State hasn't played anybody yet. So maybe if they play against better competition, that slows down. But I think Reese has the traits to continue to be good against any kind of team that they play against.
Not an Illinois fan, I take it.
No, they just don't impress me.
Yeah.
Every time I watch, it's Luke Altmaier, right? Like, sure, I can see him make one 20-yard seam pass or a 20-yard post play or something, but then it's a fumble or an interception or something, and I'm just not impressed with Illinois. I like that they've turned their program around. They put good people in the NFL draft every single year, which I think is an impressive thing to do if you're kind of a mid-tier program that's not in the SEC. But they just don't impress me from a matching up well against Ohio State or Indiana type of criteria, I guess is how I'll put it.
Okay. Yeah. And they've been absolutely destroyed by the good teams that they've played. Obviously, Ohio
Yeah.
State beat them by, I think it was around 20 points. And they lost to Illinois, who we already talked about, by like 50, right?
Yeah, I think it was 35 to nothing at half. Mendoza was just dicing them up. And
Crazy.
I mean, that's why I said I need to see more from Mendoza because the Illinois DBs were all injured and one got ejected and he just kept cooking them. And then obviously Mendoza's done more since then, but Illinois just not impressing me so far this season. But we can get into my final take if we're kind of done with the college talk here. To go back to the start of the episode, it was over. I think that was the first time we talked about, right? Second team. It was so over for the New York Jets. And I think in particular, it is going to be over for Aaron Glenn this season. I think that this is going to be a one and done tenure for Glenn as the head coach of the New York Jets. The team just doesn't seem locked in. Like, I don't want to say they don't seem professional, but because it's not a laughing stock like Joe Douglas's Jets were when he was the GM, right? They just don't seem like they're locked in on every play. The halftime decision today was just perplexing, and I don't really understand because Justin Fields was like staring at Glenn, like asking, "Hey, do I go for this? Are we ready to run a play?" And Glenn just kind of stared back at him the whole
Yeah.
time. This is obviously the last winless team, and if Carolina is able to pull off the road win, the game is currently a pick 'em, like even odds on betting sites. If Carolina is able to pull off a win there, they're 0-7. And then I think you mentioned they have games against the Browns and Bengals were the two teams you mentioned. And if they aren't able to get wins there, then I don't know what to say. Like there's not going to be any more winnable games. So I think Glenn, I don't know if he gets fired in season, but I think he's just going to last one season. I think it's unfortunate because I had not high expectations, but high relative to what they are right now expectations. And hopefully, if they get the first overall pick and stuff, they can kind of rebuild around that. But I just don't know if he makes it past this season.
Yeah, Evan, our resident Jets fan of the 2 point conversion, he's been on the Aaron Glenn might be a potential one and done train for like 3 weeks now. So I'm going to give this an A. We've talked a lot about head coaches that could be fired, and his name has kind of eluded those conversations, but it's getting too much to ignore at this point. That team looks terrible. Like you said, it just doesn't seem to be as professional as maybe what we would have hoped for this Jets team. And it's unfortunate because we thought they had a ton of talent. And for them to look this way with a first year head coach, first year GM, um, it's rough. It's rough, and even if things do kind of pull together towards the end of this year, are you going to trust this regime with potential new franchise quarterback pick at the top of the draft? I'm not sure that I would, to be honest. And that's unfortunate because I was very, very high on just this brain trust going into this year. I thought that they could be a sneaky like 8-win team. That has not manifested so far.
And to your point, uh, if Glenn is let go and they get the number one pick, do you keep that GM there? I think Darren Moogie is his name. Do you keep him there to make that pick, or do you try to start all over again? Excuse me. It's just like bad vibes throughout the entire organization.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think you would have to just clean house completely, which sucks because with Moogie in particular, I think that this draft class that he added is actually very talented. Mason Taylor, we're pretty high on. Obviously, we talked pretty extensively about how Armand Membu was really good. To open the season, I don't think we've seen much of Azarai Thomas, but Malachi Moore plays a lot of snaps for this Jets defense. So, um, yeah, it's really unfortunate, but I think if you're going to clean out the head coach, all of his staff, like I'm pretty sure it was a case where Aaron Glenn like handpicked his general manager. They worked together previously. I think they were with each other in Detroit as well. So it's unfortunate, but I think it is a situation where you would have to just completely clean house, which doesn't seem fair for a manager that only got one draft, one season. It's just not really the nature of the job. But yeah, I just don't see how you can continue with really anybody there so long as this continues.
Hopefully, the draft can provide some, or this upcoming draft rather, can provide some hope for them going forward. But yeah, if they lose this week, I think it's a lost season.
Speaking of bad quarterbacks, and I hate to say this, but I'm really afraid that Geno Smith might not be the Las Vegas Raiders starting quarterback by the end of the season. He has been pretty consistently bad. He's turned the ball over, I think, more than any other quarterback in the NFL. I don't have the stat to back that up. I'm just kind of eyeball that. He's not really being helped out much. I will give him that. The offensive line has been terrible. Brock Bowers has been hurt to open the season, and when he's not been hurt, he's been just less effective, I'll say. The wide receivers and lead pass catchers are Michael Mayer, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker. the two rookie receivers that we were pretty high on, Dante Thornton and Jake Besh, neither of those guys have really made themselves known so far in the season. The defense is pretty bad. I get that they got a win today against, we'll call it a hapless Tennessee Titans team, but I am really afraid that we're kind of watching the end of Geno Smith as a starting NFL quarterback.
I'm going to say, first of all, who are their backup? Like, who's the backup
So they
quarterback?
traded for Kenny
Kenny
Pickett
Pickett?
before the season started.
Yeah, I'll give this an A, and I don't want that to be the case. I'm looking right now. Geno Smith has 10 interceptions through today, through this week. And that's the most in the league. Jake Browning was second most with 8, which is incredible for Jake Browning. Geno's also taken 16 sacks. I don't know how many fumbles, if at all, if he has any fumbles. Um, this site, ESPN site, for whatever reason, doesn't show that, but it's just tough, right? You mentioned they haven't had Brock Bowers since week 1, and that was probably their most resounding win, was week 1 over the New England Patriots. Ashton Genty, they're getting him going, but it's not efficient running. They lose Colton Miller, the left tackle, last week for the season, I believe. Trey Tucker is their receiver 1 right now, and he's a very, very good player. I don't want to take it away from Trey Tucker, but he's not a like a bona fide wide receiver 1 guy, right? This isn't Jackson Smith and Jigba. And another incredible game from him. The weapons just aren't there. I think their returns on the rookie class haven't boosted this team like maybe we wanted it to. And it's just disappointing because I'm a big Geno fan. When he was in Seattle, I thought he did turn around his career. He was one of the best deep ball passers in the league to me, and we really haven't seen that materialize. And even in Seattle, he didn't have a good offensive line, or he didn't have a formidable wall that could give him a ton of time. He just made it happen, and he hasn't really made that happen in Vegas so far this season. Like you said, they won today, which is awesome. They're 2-4 on the year now. If we're looking at the that mock draft we were talking about, or our Tankathon standings, they're 8th right now, and then they have the Chiefs next week, then the Jaguars, Broncos, Cowboys, and then Browns. So maybe the Browns will be a good game for them, but it's up against them. And I don't know if he continues to throw interceptions, I think that's going to be the easiest reason for Pete Carroll to bench him and move to Kenny Pickett.
Yeah. And I'm honestly not sure what the cause necessarily has been. I think just eyeball test. I think that he's been throwing the ball with less velocity than he has the past few years. Obviously, I think he's dealt with some injuries over the years. He's a year older as well. Oftentimes, you can kind of see that dip as you get into your mid 30s, which Geno Smith is. I think it's also decision making has been very, very poor. I feel like every time I'm watching Geno Smith, there's a plethora of decisions where he's just not getting away with what he's used to getting away with. I think because of the velocity drop, but also there's just less weapons for this Vegas team. And then I don't know. It feels like a lot of things that he's been getting away with. He's just not capable of doing so.
They went from maybe one of the best league pass teams to one of the teams maybe you should pass on
They
if
were
you
first in my
they were
rankings, I
first.
think. Pretty
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
the
So
the the Raiders and the Bengals, right? Just falls
actually,
for different reasons.
they might have been like 5 or 6 now that I think about it, because I think I had the Jags first for Travis Hunter, which that hasn't
You've got
necessarily gone as
well,
well.
but they've been a fun team to watch,
They have
probably
been.
outside of
Yeah.
today, which was just kind of rough. Um, I don't want to get on another Brian Thomas rant, but he kind of got sold on one of the plays today on the offensive offsides from
Yeah.
Travis Hunter. But
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there.
So with that, I think we're going to get out of here. Jacob, was there anything else you wanted to cover before we leave this one?
Not particularly. We'll talk about more stuff when we do our episode later in the week, but I think we nailed most of the games today. The only one that I think we didn't get was the Saints and Patriots game, and Drake May is just Excellent. That's the only thing I have to say about that.
Incredible player. Incredible. There was a pass where he left his feet. I think it was a 3rd and 11 or 12. He left his feet and hit a receiver over the middle of the field, to convert a 3rd down. Just an incredible play. He was throwing seeds today, like truly just bomb after bomb. I think multiple of which were called back despite them being touchdowns, and like an
Yeah.
offensive pass interference, weird calls all around. Um, but yeah,
He
he looks
he
like a
looked
top 5
like
quarterback.
I'll go even further. He looked like the best QB in the league today, is what I'll say.
I like it. I like it. I don't think we touched on the excuse me, the 49ers Bucks game either. Just real quick, Bucks looked like the better team. Fred Warner out for the season. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Um, we'll
I
see
know
if it's.
I know
Go ahead.
Mac Jones threw 2 interceptions, but he also his receivers left about 100 yards on the field from him.
Yeah, yeah. There were so many dropped passes in that
Mhm.
game.
But,
So many.
just like how the Colts are 5-1 in the AFC, I think the Bucks have the best NFC record right now.
They do. Those are the two best teams by record in the NFL. But that's Steelers are 4-1. Detroit's playing right now. Buffalo's 4-1 as well. So we'll see how long that lasts. But if I had told you the Bucks and the Colts were the two best teams in the NFL through 6 weeks, would you believe me?
The Bucks, maybe, the Colts, definitely not.
With that, we're gonna get out of here. You can follow Jacob at Jacob LaQuire on Twitter. You can follow myself at dj.png on Twitter. The show at 2p_conversion. You can follow our Substack at 2pointconversion.com. Jacob, we will be back